Hello, everyone. We're giving our audience a few seconds to join, and I think we are ready to start. Next slide. This is Sabrina Paganoni. I'm connecting today from the HEALEY Center at Mass General. I'm here with our patient navigator, Catherine Small. And for today, we're going to do something different. We had this three-part series because we received suggestions from many of you about possibly doing like a little mini series of updates on ALS. And so we did have a webinar last week. In case you missed it, it's available. The recording is available on currently approved drugs for ALS. And today we're going to do sort of a part 2 with what we have learned from the platform trial so far, like why we designed it, why we launched it, what we learned so far, and then we're going to transition to what's next. And then next week in particular, I want to talk a little bit more about the next steps for the platform trial. So with that in mind, let's go to the next slide and let's talk a little bit about why we designed the trial and we launched the trial. We understand that people with ALS don't have time to waste, really, to wait. And research timelines are always too slow. And we were talking about this actually in 2018 with some colleagues, and we really were really inspired by Mr. Healy, whom you see in the picture, who was a very successful businessman from the Boston area, who was diagnosed himself with ALS, and Dr. Sukovich, whom you know well, became her physician. And so Mr. Healy challenged Dr. Sukovich to rethink the way clinical trials are done in ALS. As a businessman, he realized that the field was too slow, that the system was too inefficient. And so he decided to give a transformative donation, and we are really so grateful to Mr. Healy, AMG, his company, as well as his supporters, friends, many people who rallied around him and really allowed the establishment of the Healy Center, which was launched in November 2018. And so the idea behind this was that, if we could come together with this new funding, this new center, we could actually accelerate the clinical trials in ALS, and we could really make an impact on the entire field. And so Dr. Sukovich had the idea of looking at cancer, where innovative trial designs had already been started and implemented, and this was very new in the neurosciences at the time. And so we really spent some time learning from the best in the field, people who had done a number of other platform trials in cancer and other disease areas as well. And so we realized that simply by changing the approach, the trial design approach from traditional trial to platform trials, we would be able to accelerate the timelines. We could cut the time it takes to test drugs. We could cut the costs and reduce the allocation to placebo, which obviously is something that we don't want. We want to reduce really the number of people on placebo as much as possible. And that's why we began this idea of really doing, that's how we got this idea of doing an ALS trial using a platform approach. Click one more time. Again, it was clear from our research and from what other experts had told us, the platform trials has several advantages over traditional trials. So this was kind of our research in October, November of 2018. And then we launched the Healy Center, thanks to Mr. Healy and his friends. And we continue to work towards developing the first platform trial for ALS. So if you can go to the next slide, that's what happened basically in 2019. We spent the entire year before the pandemic. We didn't know the pandemic would happen. Obviously, we wanted to work with the entire community. We worked with a lot of companies, the FDA, patients, foundations, sites, investigators, to start to talk about the idea of doing something very different. Because, doing the platform trial was not only sort of a different trial design, but was a different concept for the entire community. The idea was to work collaboratively with multiple companies at the same time, sharing the same infrastructure, sharing the meetings with the FDA. Actually, that picture was in 2019 when we went to the FDA with 3 companies. We went together, which was really a first. Normally, each company goes individually to the FDA to speak about their own program. And this time we went together. We were in the same room. And we are really thankful to the guidance that the FDA has provided and continues to provide. They really wanted to help the field come up with something more efficient so that we could make progress faster. And we are very grateful to our first industry partners and to all of the ones that followed, as well as to the many groups from patients and the academic community that came together to really launch this trial. So we were really ready to launch actually in March of 2020 when the pandemic broke out, but really that didn't stop us. So if you can go to the next slide. You can see that we continue to grow. We are now grounded in robust academia, industry partnerships. And so today I want to share again what we've done over the last couple of years since we launched. And I want to mention that I share this very similar, if not identical content to colleagues at the recent Academy of Neurology meeting. And so we really wanted to make the same level of information available to the entire community. And that's why we're on this webinar. Next slide. So again, we launched this common protocol and shared infrastructure to gain both operational and scientific efficiencies in 2020. So this common protocol and infrastructure is like our house where we can host many guests. So if you can click a couple of times, you can see that in 2020, we started with 3 regimens. We added one in 2021. And keep in mind, most hospitals were closed or semi-closed at the time. So it's really remarkable that we continue to grow. We added regimen E in 2022. And then in 2023, right now, we are launching 2 new regimens. So if you can click one more time, you'll see that now we have F and G essentially up and running. So we're very excited to have continued to grow over the last, since basically the summer of 2020, almost 3 years now. And if you can click one more time, essentially what we've done is to lay the groundwork, to lay the foundations for this trial that is continuing to grow, and we really want to continue to grow it. So we have one protocol, one single governance structure. But so far, we have already included 7 regimens or 7 drugs, and we're working actually on the design of number 8. And we are in discussions with other companies potentially for additional regimens. Over 1,000 participants have been consented so far, and this has been across a network of over 70 sites in the US. So what did we learn so far? Next slide. Well, the first thing is that really we can do a lot more with a platform trial compared to what we could do with a traditional trial. Why? And I want to explain this concept, which is very important. So each regimen or each drug is compared to a shared placebo data set. And that data set keeps growing as new regimens are added. So as you know, for many of you are participating in the trial, participants can, be within this infrastructure, same infrastructure, no matter what drug they're assigned to. But then within each regimen, participants are assigned to active or placebo in a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning that there's many more people who go on active compared to placebo. And then the placebo group is basically shared, and each drug is compared to the shared placebo. That's how we can minimize the number of people on placebo. Normally, when you do a trial, kind of as a standalone, because you need to have a large enough number of people on placebo. That's why you oftentimes have a 1-to-1 or 50-50 chance of being on active or placebo. Here, because we're working together and we're sharing the placebo participants or placebo data sets, we can actually minimize the number of people on placebo. And we can do that because we are enrolling the same population across different regimens. So if you can click one more time, you'll see our key eligibility criteria. So far, we have enrolled a relatively broad population. There's still some parameters, but certainly more liberal compared to other trials. So we are accepting participants within 3 years from onset with a slow vital capacity of at least 50%. And we allow participants to be on the standard of care medications, including Riluzole, Edaravone, and Relivrio. So all of this to say that by having this common approach, we can test more drugs, we can reduce placebo, and we can make progress faster. So if we can go to the next slide. I also want to explain, practically speaking, what we test in each regimen. So the main goal of this phase 2/3 trial is for each regimen to provide a go, no-go decision. And what does that mean? That means that when drugs go into this space, they need to be able to rapidly screen in or when companies go into this space, they need to rapidly screen in or screen out their drugs. Every drug, by definition, needs to be tested in sort of different studies that kind of progressively get larger. That's the so-called phase 1, phase 2, and then phase 3 sequence. And that's for good reasons, because you need to essentially keep learning about the drug until you can definitely assess for efficacy. And our trial is kind of in the middle, sort of in the phase 2 to 3 space. And what that means is that that's actually the most critical time when you have to make a decision about whether a drug should be moved forward to a definitive confirmatory phase 3 study, or whether the drug should be abandoned. And so we want to do that efficiently, because right now we have so many drugs in development for ALS, which is good news. Obviously, we want as many drugs as possible, that we need an efficient mechanism to screen these drugs. So, and we do that by comparing sort of the active group to the placebo group, again, the shared placebo group. And we, the study, the placebo control study, is as short as it can be to achieve the goals, which is 24 weeks or about 6 months. After the 6-month period, there is an active treatment extension period where all participants, regardless of their previous assignment to active or placebo, can receive active treatment long-term. And that's actually an integral part of the study. In other words, the active treatment extension does provide important data in terms of long-term safety, obviously, but also long-term efficacy data. So if you can click one more time, you'll see what our main goals are. So essentially, to provide the go, no-go decision, we have a primary endpoint that's measured over 6 months, which is the first period of the study. And that's essentially a change in disease severity. There's a lot of complicated statistics behind it, but essentially it's sort of a top-notch statistical method that's been developed by our statistical group to really be able to make a go, no-go decision. We also collect a number of other endpoints, not just safety, but also other measures of function, respiratory function, muscle function, as well as a number of exploratory endpoints and biomarkers, which are so important, because biomarkers, as you may know, are really something that we really need in ALS to be able to tell if some people are responding better than others, or to be able to actually add to our efficacy assessments about each drug. If you can click one more time, I do want to mention that in addition to be able to tell which drugs work, we also need to be able to tell which drugs do not work, and we want to do that quickly. And that's why we have interim analysis for futility built into the platform. So the entire platform periodically goes through this futility analysis, and that's really to tell if drugs are unlikely to succeed. If so, we want to remove them from the platform so that we can reallocate resources to the regimens that are more likely to succeed. Next slide. So I want to share what we've learned so far, again, in terms of, not just the operations, the mechanics, we set up the trial, but we also learned that people with ALS really want to participate in innovative research. And I really want to thank Catherine and Alison, our patient navigator team, who have really served as a central resource to be able to answer emails, phone calls, Zoom calls with ALS families, and they started working with us in October 2020. And really, so far, we've had a lot of obviously interactions with the community. And Catherine, thank you so much. I know you have really literally answered thousands of emails, phone calls. We have these weekly webinars with really a lot of views, both live but also recorded, and we want to make them available to everyone. And we're very happy to have also people reaching out to us from all over the world. So thank you for that. And we really want to provide transparency and kind of real-time updates. That's also why, again, we have different guest speakers. Sometimes we bring you news about new biomarkers or other tools, so that, for people living with ALS, they can be up to date with all the latest in terms of research. Next slide. What we also learned is that it's incredibly important to provide research access, not just in the big cities, but across a diverse network of sites. We're very fortunate to work with the NEALS consortium, and so far we have included over 70 sites as part of the platform trial. Certainly we have more sites we continue to add. We're actually in the process of adding more sites right now, and we want to continue to be available in new geographies and also with more capacity in densely populated areas. And so so we continue to grow. Really, we really want to be able to provide the trial to people, not only the people who live in Boston and New York or Los Angeles, but people who live in rural areas, people who may be living far away from a city, and really so that we can offer the same opportunities to everyone, which is very different from what was happening before the platform trial was established. So just before, again, the pandemic, just before we were in existence, what happened is that every trial was only available to a selected number of sites. So let's say that trial A was available in 10 cities and trial B was available in maybe 20 cities, but the two may not overlap. And so for every patient, depending on your location, you had to decide, okay, is this trial that's available to me the one I want to be in, or am I eligible for it? And perhaps sometimes, patients were eligible for trials that weren't available only in other centers. And now with the platform trial, all regimens are available at all sites. And so it doesn't matter if you live, in Boston or in Idaho or Texas. I mean, really, literally, wherever you are, the same regimens are available to patients. So really, we want to continue to grow and offer even more regimens so that, again, so that the research options are available to everyone. Next slide. And we want to learn a lot from this study, because in addition to testing drugs, which obviously is our primary goal so that we can hopefully bring new treatments to patients soon, we also want to learn about ALS because we understand that there are still some knowledge gaps. And if we can use this trial as an opportunity to add knowledge, to bring new knowledge, then we're going to be better positioned, not only to continue to adapt this particular trial, our trial, but also to share our learnings with others, so that other trials, other projects may also continue to become better. So for this, actually, we have a lot of efforts going on in terms of learning about the genetics of the disease. We're measuring neurofilaments across the board. We're also testing novel methods, including digital technology. During the pandemic, we had a home spirometer that allowed us to do the study even when respiratory function tests were prohibited during the pandemic at hospitals. And so that was really critical. And also we continue to use a speech app to really be able to monitor certain aspects of function in the home environment. And we want to continue to learn about all of this. We're also including new patient-reported outcomes. Very excited that the Rhodes questionnaire is now part of the new regimens, thanks to Dr. Fournier and her colleagues, so that developed this method. So we're really excited to be able to test new outcome measures and new biomarkers as we move forward. Next slide. And just to give you a sense of what we learned, one of the things that we learned already from the platform trial is that we're able to reliably monitor respiratory function in the home, because our home spirometry, meaning measurements of respiratory function done at home, correlated very highly with our in-clinic measurements. And so we're sharing this, we're writing up the paper, and really we want to share all of these learnings, as well as the detailed methods. Actually, the methods that we used are very important. So it's not any home spirometer or any method. It's really, we paid a lot of attention to make sure that this type of home monitoring would be reliable, and the results actually showed that it was reliable. So during the pandemic, we were able to monitor safely in the home environment respiratory function for many people. And so we're very happy about this, and we'll definitely continue to share our methodology so that others can use it if they're interested in this tool. Next slide. So what have we learned so far? So first of all, as I said earlier, the trial was set up to provide go, no-go decisions in an efficient way. So since we launched in the summer of 2020, we gave a no-go answer to two regimens A and B. Obviously, that was disappointing, but at least we know that we have provided these no-go decision with efficiency and rapid execution. We were happy to give instead a go decision to regimens C and D, who are now considering phase 3 trials. Again, because we are in this phase 2 to 3 space, our goal is to provide answers quickly so that the companies can then decide whether to take the drug to phase 3 testing, which is really the decisive or the final step in the testing process. And so, it's good that we had these kind of, results, and that will allow the companies to move forward. We still don't know fully the efficacy of these drugs, but definitely we had positive signals which allowed regimens C and D to graduate to a phase 3 trial. Now, we don't have the results of regimen E yet. We expect them by the end of the year, and we're very excited to now be launching F and G, and we already started enrolling for F, and again, we expect enrollment for G to start very soon. So we're very happy that these 2 new drugs will be tested in 2023 so that we can learn more answers about these particular drugs. Next slide. So just to summarize, platform trials are becoming more popular. So we were one of the very first in the neurosciences, but now many people are setting up their own platform trials in their own field because it's clearly recognized now that they're more efficient, essentially, and they can also provide more learnings for the entire field. Click one more time. So in particular, since we launched the ALS trial, the ALS platform trial, we launched in 2020, so we're almost 3 years old. We have included over 70 sites. We have included 7 investigational drugs so far, hundreds, I should say, now over 1,000 participants. So we are really, continuing to grow with additional regimens that are in startup or in the planning stages. One more click. So initial learnings, our main learnings so far are go, no-go decisions for the first 4 regimens. And so we met the goal of the trial, which was to be able to decide whether these first 4 regimens had to move to phase 3 or not. Click one more time. And we are continuing to learn about biomarkers and endpoints, and the plan is to really share data and samples with the scientific community as they become available. We're now, really writing up all of our experience for the first 2 years, really to share all of this so that others can benefit from all of this work. Next slide. And I do want to mention that we have been meeting with many other disease-specific networks, both in the US and globally. Many people are setting up platform trials for their own diseases, and we're really happy to be part of this movement and really pay forward. We received excellent mentorship from other platform trials, which allowed us to start the trial relatively quickly. And so we're sharing all this knowledge with others. And many of our documents are actually available online. You can find the link. I would say we're also working hard to publish the results of the first 4 regimens and other papers. So those are coming up soon, hopefully. Next slide. I do want to say that we continue to be inspired by people living with ALS. So all of this work is really done by a dedicated team that really wants to make a difference for the people that we see in clinic every day. And so I just want to thank all of you, especially the participants in this trial and everyone who has been supporting the trial in one way or another, because really thanks to everyone's support, we can really do something different. We can work together as a community, again, not in isolation, testing different drugs, but testing drugs together so that we can sort of synergize and amplify the learnings. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing to really support this trial. Next slide. And I do want to mention that we want to continue to engage not only on the Thursday webinars, but also on other platforms. Very excited that Everything ALS invited us to join them for their call next week. And so we'll be on the webinar as well with Dr. Sukovic. So hopefully we'll see many of you there as well. And we'll continue to share news about other webinars. Many people are doing webinars now on different topics. Many of those topics were actually suggested by people who attend this particular webinar. So thank you for sending us ideas. And as you'll see over the next few weeks, different colleagues now are giving webinars on different platforms, whether it's Everything ALS or NEALS or other platforms. And so we'll be sure to advertise those as well. Next slide. And as always, please feel free to contact Catherine, and the QR codes also will allow you to register for the weekly webinars as well as for our newsletter that we call the ALS Link. So thank you so much. And I know I went a little bit over, but I was asked to provide a summary of what we learned so far. It's good to give weekly updates, but it's also good to reflect on what we've done so far. All right. So I see a few excellent questions. I want to take them, I think kind of they're all pertinent and relevant to what I just discussed. So one question is, have the phase 3 trials launched for C and D? No, that's a great question. No, they have not launched yet. They are in preparation, and they will be led by the respective companies. Obviously, we're going to be collaborating with them on sort of the design and again, the overall plan, but they're not part of the platform trial. So we provide package of information and data so that then a dedicated trial can be done for kind of that will be the final step essentially in the development of these drugs. There's a question about whether we plan to extend the platform internationally. Oh, absolutely, we would love to. The only reason this has not happened so far is because of logistics and regulations. Every country is under a different, or region is under a different regulatory authority. So for example, the FDA regulates drug development in the US, the European Medicines Agency regulates drug development in Europe, and there's many more other agencies like Health Canada or the Japanese agency, etc. And so depending on that, actually they have different regulations. And so just in terms of complexity, we haven't gone there yet, but hopefully soon. How many sites are part of regimen F? The number keeps growing, and so I'm sorry I don't have the most recent numbers, but we'll be sure to share them with you next week, both in terms of sites and participants enrolled in F. And again, the numbers are very fluid, as you may imagine. They continue to go up. There's a question about sort of the growing placebo data set. With the growing placebo data set, will we be able to increase the percentage of active drug versus placebo in future regimens? That's a great question. I mean, that's definitely a consideration, and we'll have to decide at some point. We may have to retire the placebos based on standard of care changes. In other words, if kind of the placebo data the placebo behavior changes because of new drugs being added, we may have to retire those placebo data. We have not made final decisions yet, and we are continuing to monitor that. So first we have to again analyze the data and decide what to do next. But in theory, if we can continue to share placebo data, we could potentially change the ratio. So in terms of when we're going to start enrolling for regimen G, that could happen any day, really. So hopefully by next week, we will have news. It should be literally any time. So very excited that I think that by next week, we'll have both up and running. But again, let's confirm that, and we'll give you the numbers next week. There's a question about genetic testing. So the genetic testing that's been done so far in the platform trial is for research only. It's not to return results to the participants. And there are many different reasons for that. I'm happy to explain it, but I also want to mention that right now in the US, genetic testing is absolutely free and available to anyone with ALS. So if you're interested in learning about your genetic status, that's definitely available. So please talk to your physician. Again, the testing is completely free and is available in the US to all people with ALS. And so for the trial, actually, we don't do it in real time. So we felt that it was not as helpful, given that the genetic testing is actually available clinically and it's free right now. So again, for now, we're not notifying the participants because it's not in real time. So to really be helpful, it would have to be in real time. The question about why we have a vital capacity cutoff of 50%. And so you're absolutely right that for people, especially for people who may have bulbar onset, even a 50% cutoff could be hard because there are kind of people with bulbar weakness may have difficulty actually doing the maneuver, even if their respiratory function is still good. And so that's actually because, we have to essentially set some parameters for being able to tell if the drug works or not. And unfortunately, we need to have a relatively homogeneous population with similar baseline metrics when they start. I do want to mention that we completely recognize that it's too bad that not everyone can participate. And that's why we're working so hard to establish expanded access options. And maybe one of these webinars, we can actually give an update on that. There are now many sites that have expanded access available to them. I know it's not all sites, and believe me, we are working hard to increase that. We'll see, in terms of, hopefully depending on fundraising and grant activities, hopefully we'll be able to bring expanded access to the majority, if not all, platform trial sites. We're definitely trying to do that to be able to actually meet the needs of people that cannot qualify for the trial. So I think I took all the questions so far, and I'm sorry I went over and over today, but I really wanted to provide kind of an overview of what we've done so far. And actually, there's a couple of last-minute questions. I can take them before we hang up. So there's a question about if it's a problem that we allow both familial and sporadic forms of ALS. Well, I think that right now, basically for people with SOD1 mutation, I think that the priority would be for them to get tofersen, which is the newly approved drug. So I think that that group has a different option at this stage. Right now, again, I think that when we see people in the clinic, we cannot distinguish if they have a genetically based ALS or a non-genetically based ALS. Definitely genetic testing is available, as I said earlier, to everyone. I would encourage you to talk to your neurologist or physician about it. And right now, we do actually collect the genetic information in order to be able to do those subgroup analyses. You're right. It could be that perhaps some subgroups are more responsive. That's why we collect the data. And then again, not in real time for the genetic testing, but then we can go and correlate genetic status to the results. In terms of other, upcoming regimens, there's a question about fecal transplant can be considered as a regimen. In order for a regimen to be included, the company or investigators that are leading that research or that molecule or intervention, they need to apply. So absolutely anyone is welcome to apply. Actually, I share the QR code for application on the slide. So if any company is on the line, or if any investigators who has a good idea for molecules or interventions is interested, please feel free to apply, and we can discuss consideration in the platform.
Dr. Paganoni.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I wanted to interject. I think there's a chance they might have meant if it's in terms of like exclusionary medications and supplements, if fecal transplants might fall into the category of being
I see. Sorry if I misunderstood the question. Yeah. So again, it depends on if it was part of an actual trial. Thank you, Catherine. So if somebody received an interventional drug, like an experimental drug or an intervention recently as part of an active trial, they might be exclusionary, but please note that it's very important to look at the details. So I cannot answer your question specifically because it depends on what you're actually referring to. So I would recommend that you discuss with your physician whether that specific intervention that you received would exclude you from the trial or not. And also after a washout period, people can be included. So again, it's a very detailed evaluation. Please talk to your physician about it. And the very last question is, when is someone notified if they were on placebo or the active drug? Well, that has to be at the end of the trial. So we basically, there's a number of reasons for that. We need to have the entire trial completed. And as long as the placebo data is still in use, we have to discuss with the FDA when we can unblind. Actually, we will be having those discussions. And so I'll definitely update you on that as soon as we hear more. Okay, thank you so much. And we'll see you again next week. Thank you.